Welcome back to Two Doctors Homestead. My name's Daniel. Had a lot of requests to make this video. It's something people have asked me many times and I've been sort of putting it off, but I want to jump into it. And that is prepping, emergency preparedness, disaster preparedness. If you're in an apartment, if you're in a tiny home, if you're in an RV, you've got a friend in an RV, had a lot of conversations with them about it. There's some challenges, right, when you're in an apartment. If you follow the channel, you know I don't live in an apartment now, but I have, right? I'm tapping on past experiences. There's been a lot of times in my life that I've lived in small spaces, and certainly that is the number one challenge. Generally, in apartments is small space. Maybe you're in a giant penthouse and you call it an apartment. That's okay too. Usually, if you're in an apartment, space is going to be your first challenge. Maybe not your only challenge, maybe not your top challenge, but certainly space is going to be a challenge, right? Want to kind of walk through some different areas of prepping, emergency preparedness, and give some tips on how to kind of address some of these challenges, some pointers, maybe things you haven't thought about. So number one, I'm going to lean down a little bit. I got a lot of stuff stacked around me. I got some props, is water, right? Any emergency situation in life, in general, water is important. You need water to survive. I've done the math. I've looked at all the there's so many different fancy water containers you can get. I think this one is 7 gallons. You've got things like this, a little more tactical. I think this is 12 liters. There's countless water containers you can get on the market. Generally, when you look at the cost of the container, how much water they hold versus the equivalent just in water bottles usually win for price, right? So get the containers if you want to get the containers. They have their uses. You can refill water bottles. You can refill the container. When you're talking about water catchment, right, which is water collection, you're probably going to be a little better off with something larger, whether you put it under a drain pipe or something like that, versus it's going to be harder to do water catchment on water bottles. But cost per gallon, cost per unit of water is generally cheaper. Water bottles are easier. They're lighter to carry. When you've got something like this full, it's going to be pretty heavy, and that might be prohibitive for some people. Basic water bottles, right? Hard to go more than 3 days without water. So how much water do you need? Once again, space. Space is going to be the issue. Certainly budget is an issue, but that's an issue for everybody, I think, right now. But how much water can you store? How much do you want to store? Whether it's 72 hours, which is sort of the old FEMA government recommendation, whether you're talking 2 weeks. That gets back to the why, right? Disaster preparedness. You look at things like tornadoes, hurricanes, floods, disasters happen. You could take it all the way up to Civil War, right? We've talked about the surprisingly solid mathematical case of the tinfoil hat prepper. He used the hydrology math and said there's about a 38% chance of civil war in anyone's lifetime, regardless of what's going on, right? So you can go from want to be prepared for a tornado to I want to be prepared for total societal collapse. How much water you're going to need may depend on what you're talking about there, but to have a week's worth of water, the general recommendation is 1 gallon per day per person at a minimum. So you're talking 7 gallons for a week. So it's going to take up about that much space per person. These would probably stack, right? But so do cases of water bottles. So number one, think about water. Now we call this stored water, right? So this is full, this is ready to go. There's some options, some quick, easy, disposable option water bags, emergency water bags. I think this one was from the Red Cross. This holds 65 gallons. There's other ones out there. Aquapod kit also holds 65 gallons. Generally, these are going to be single use, but if you look at it, it goes in your bathtub, right? So if there's an emergency situation and you have enough time to fill up your bathtub, you could put this in the bathtub, fill it up. It says 2 weeks of water for a family of 4, 65 gallons of water. So this is nice to have as that it's an emergency, right? We know it's an emergency. I don't have 65 gallons of water stashed, but something like this, you may have the opportunity to fill it up. If there's a hurricane coming, tornado, whatever it is, right? There may be an opportunity to fill it up. They're both good to have, but in terms of actual stored water in the bottle, labels falling off, That's done. In the bottle, ready to go. A week, 2 weeks, right? Something like that. You're talking 7 gallons, 14 gallons per person, maybe more. You're not going to survive very long with water. Once again, if you're in an apartment, water collection becomes more of a challenge. I lived in different apartments, 4 different states. You may not have, say, like where I have a shed. I could do rain collection off the shed, do rain collection off the roof. You may not be able to do rain collection off the roof, right? Your water heater, depending on the size, might have 50 gallons of water. Well, your apartment may not have its own water heater, so you may not be able to count on that, say 50 gallons of water. Certainly drums, 50-gallon drums are an option. That's a big space issue in an apartment, but water bottles, I would go that way. And I don't want to go too much time on water. So you've got your water, very important. Any kind of emergency disaster preparedness, you want to have your water. Looking at the rule of threes, you've got 3 minutes without shelter, 3 days without water. Just to bump back on shelter really quick, whether you're bugging in, whether you're bugging out, if it's winter time and the power's out, something like a sleeping bag. Not a bad idea. It'll help you out. If you're in an apartment, power could go out, right? That happens. We had a power outage in Texas again this winter. It happens, right? So a sleeping bag could go a long way, keep you away from hypothermia. We've talked about this before. If it's below 50 degrees inside the room you're sleeping in, that's not safe. So that's when you want to start talking about something like a sleeping bag, or you can take it a step further and look at like a Mr. Buddy heater, right? These are great. This one says indoor safe. You need the propane tanks, either the little tanks, the big tanks with the adapter hose. You have both options. But if you can, if you got the space, you got the budget, something like a Mr. Buddy heater, great to have, right? Certainly a good option to have in your preps, right? So Buddy heater, sleeping bag, you've got your shelter, whether you're bugging in, whether you're bugging out, and we'll kind of get into the bug out. You've got your water, right? Next thing, not in particular order, medical, right? Certainly this could be your first 3 minutes, some kind of first aid kit. You can assemble it yourself, right? You can buy your bandages. I've got skin stapler. I got all sorts of stuff in here, tourniquet, chest seals. This is more of a trauma bag. We've talked about it. We've made videos on trauma bags and first aid kits. People tend to lose interest, and that's okay. You can get a pre-made kit. You can make your own kit. Have some emergency first aid supplies, stuff you're comfortable, right? Whether you're talking about a chest seal, whether you're talking about a tourniquet, whether you're talking about airway, whether you're talking about a needle for your chest, look at the stuff you're comfortable with. Certainly have medical, have first aid. Injuries happen. They happen to us on the Homestead all the time. First aid's important, but I said you can buy a kit, you can build a kit, put in a Ziploc, and you're good to go. It covers medicine. Let's talk about food. A lot of options for food, and food takes up space just like water takes up space. You can look at something like energy bars, right? Whether it's the chocolate high energy bars, whether it is power bars, any of those bars, candy bars, if that's the way you want to go, some kind of food, right? Power bars is an option. You can look at basic rice, right? Very budget friendly. You're talking about $1 a pound, about a pound or two a day, depending on your calories. You got to figure that out for yourself. Basic rice, right? Getting a lot of light coming in here. Getting bright. Another option's MREs, if you're into them. I've paid $5-10 a piece. You can get them for less. It really depends on the expiration date or the last check date on them. And some people say they last forever or certainly a very long time if you're into MREs. This one is only 1,300 calories, so probably not a day's worth of food. We used to do a lot of prepper pantry videos and say 1,200 calories is the starvation limit, so technically it's above the starvation limit. It's a little light on the calories, right? Some other options for food, like these little sauce rations, they actually don't taste too bad. So you can look at something like the UST emergency bars. These used to be a lot less expensive. I got them for about $5 each, and now they're at least double that. 5-year shelf life. Doesn't taste bad. This is 2,400 calories. As I said, space-wise, once again, you're in an apartment. Space is an issue. That's a day or more worth of food compared to, say, 1,300 calories, right? So these are great if you're tight on space. Very portable, weight's not too bad, 18 ounces. You could get back into that pound a day category. Or if you like the freeze dried or technically dehydrated, right? These are diced onions, Desert Farms, which is the LDS store. Certainly an option, very long shelf life, right? If you're long-term prepper, this is 30-year shelf life, or you just want to buy it, forget about it, not worry about it, store it properly, lasts a very long time. But there's a lot of options for food. There's everything you see at the grocery store. Think about density, think about shelf life. So we did a lot of prepper pantry videos, just picked out individual items. Some things are not great in terms of prepping. You look at like canned vegetables, don't have a lot of calories. Frozen can be a challenge, right? If there's a power outage, all that frozen food's not going to last very long, right? So in a disaster, is frozen going to be an option? It's great, you know, in regular day-to-day, frozen foods may not be a great option. Just look at how many calories, think about your density, think about your space, how you're going to store it, right? You've got to always contend with the storage issue. Something like a mask, right? Not a bad idea. This is a N100 or P100, so it clears out 99%. It says filters at least 99.9%, 97% of solid and liquid aerosols, including oils, as well as certain organic vapors, acid, gases. May not protect you for everything. Certainly there are big fancy gas masks you can get for $300-400. But if you're worried about chemical spills, fires, that kind of stuff in your area, may not be a bad idea, right? You got to be able to breathe. Those filters do have a limited lifespan. I use them when I'm cleaning out the chicken coop, when I'm cleaning out the pig pen. They help me out, right? So they certainly work for that. I can't promise they're going to protect you from everything. So next side, we get more into the nice to have, though you might say this is critical. Even apartment, any kind of prep, and if there's a power outage, this is a battery backup for your cell phone, right? You're going to want to have communications. This one's great. It's got the cords already on it, so you don't have to worry about cords, and it has a flashlight built in. There's a ton of these out there, but some way to keep your cell phone charged. So we had power outage. We got out some of the prepper stuff, and of course we were fine. Would have been fine anyway, but we might have been sitting in the dark, staring at the wall the whole time, right? But some way to charge your cell phone, a lot of power in these. Good devices, good idea to have. You take a next step, certainly flashlights, right? These are good. The lamps are nice because you can just sit them down. This has got a couple different brightness modes. You can do strobe, you can do red, different modes on it. These are great to have. Any kind of flashlights, very useful. More long-term option, because those all take batteries, or they are batteries, is just solar lamps, right? A lot of people talk about these. The advantage is you can put it out during the day, it charges, and you take it in at night, and you've got light. So that's kind of a neat idea. Just solar lanterns, they're not very expensive. I think I got this at Aldi, just a 2-pack of solar lanterns. So something to think about. It's a 6-hour runtime. We use them outside. They last a couple years, honestly, just sitting outside, cycling every day and night. They can last a little while. So not a bad idea to have, whether you use them, whether you stash them. Little solar lamps, right? That's a rechargeable light sources that charge them during the day. Use them at night. Pardon me. Next step, we said, right? This is some basic supplies I think you should have in emergency. How much, to what quantity, right? We talk about the little power banks for your phone. They obviously make larger solar generators. If you're in an apartment, laying out a solar panel, charging a solar generator may not be an option, but something like this doesn't take up a lot of space. Charge your phone a couple times. This might be all you need to get through some kind of a power outage. Obviously, the long-term situation is going to be a different story. So challenges with the apartment. We talked about space, right? Space is always going to be a challenge. In a long-term disaster situation, you start worrying about things like security, right? When you're in an apartment, I've lived in a couple different ones. Sometimes the walls are thick concrete if you're in a big building. Sometimes they're just paper thin and you can hear your neighbors taking a shower, right? Not a lot of protection, right? So in a long-term situation, think about the movie, I think it was Station 8, Station 10, something like that. They went into the high-rise building in Chicago, kind of barricaded themselves in to ride out the viral apocalypse that happened. Eventually someone gets in, breaks through the door, right? There's going to be people around you suffering as you are suffering. Long-term disaster, at some point they're going to knock on your door. They're going to kick a hole through the wall, right? You don't know what's going to happen. It's going to be harder to replenish, right? We talk about water, talk about rain catchment. You may not have any good rain catchment options in an apartment. When you're out of water, it's time to move, right? You can't just sit there and dehydrate to death, and that's only a couple of days. So you run out of water, you bug out. Same thing on food. Gardening is great, right? We do a lot of gardening here. We got livestock, we got the chickens. None of that may be an option if you're in an apartment. I would recommend look at a community garden, right? That may not be defensible. Someone could steal your food in a disaster. But if you don't have a backyard, if you don't have anywhere to grow stuff, and you can go to a community garden, you can grow some of your own food now, and you can build up those skills. Gardening is a skill. It does take time to learn how to garden. That's not something you're going to throw some seeds at the ground, and get food, right? It takes time to learn how to garden. Think about a community garden. Think about having some seeds, right? When you run out of food, if you can't get more, you've got to bug out. And by that, I mean go somewhere else, right? Go where the grass is greener. You sort of become a refugee at that point, depending on if you have somewhere to go, right? Thin walls, not very defensible. A lot of people likely nearby. Apartments can have hundreds of units, depending on where you're at. Or you're in an RV, right? We've talked about RV. That puts a little spin on it because you might be mobile. You still have very thin walls, right? Not as defensible. Certainly have more of the mobility. In an RV, you may have some water catchment options in an RV because you can relocate. You may not have the density of people, so an RV may give you some advantages over an apartment. You have to be ready to bug out, right? There could be a fire. You know, if you're on your own, you're in your house, maybe you don't have a lot of people around you. You might feel safer from fires depending on where you're at. If you're in an apartment, some moron neighbor 3 units down could have brought the barbecue in the house to warm the house and light the whole place on fire, right? So you have to be able to bug out. You got to be ready to bug out. If you are going to bug out, something like a tent, this is not the best tent to be carrying with you. If you have to, there's backpacking tents that are lighter, but some kind of tent, right? You got to be ready to camp out, whether you're in your car or something like that. So certainly bug out is an option. Self-defense, I was going to grab some self-defense tools, but I'm going to pass on that, I think. There's always the debate between shotgun, between AR, between handgun. I'm not going to try to litigate that debate on this video. If you're going to use a self-defense tool, train, take a class, get some training, think about self-defense insurance. We talked about that before. Things like U.S. Shield, Texas Law Shield will help you out in a situation, self-defense situation, right? There can be a lot of issues after that, but certainly training is important. Don't just get a gun and be like, all right, I'm good, I got the gun, and you need to practice with it, honestly. And I've talked to people like oh, I'm good, I bought this gun at the store, self-defense tool, I'm good to go. If you haven't actually tested it, you haven't practiced with it, there's no guarantee it'll work. I've bought some expensive brand name, high-end self-defense tools, and they didn't work out of the box, right? You got to replace springs sometimes. You might have to do work. You might have to send it back. And I've bought some cheapo ones that worked great and always have. But there's no guarantee you buy any self-defense tool, even if it's $1,000, $2,000, it'll actually even work out of the box, right? So anything you get, you need to become familiar with. You need to take it out and test it, right? Couple hundred rounds through it at a minimum. Learn how to use it, learn how to be safe. And I've been doing a lot of IDPA shooting, posting those videos, International Defensive Pistol Association. That is all about self-defense shooting, and safety. Safety and accuracy are the number two. Number one, safety. Number two, accuracy. You got to be able to demonstrate firearm safety. You got to be able to hit your target. There's non-threat targets you're not supposed to hit. And I've seen the videos. I've shown the videos. Maybe you guys have seen the videos. IDPA is more about accuracy than speed. It's a combination of speed and accuracy. You can't miss fast enough to win, right? It is scored. So people have asked, it is you could say slower, right? You're not just sitting there dumping the mag. You're trying to hit specific targets based on the scenario. Certainly faster is better, but accuracy Accuracy is important. And it would be the same in real life, right? You can't just be spraying stuff all over the place, hitting people you're not intending to hit. You got to be accurate. You got to be safe. So a lot of options out there. I want to throw that out there, right? So we've talked about how you're going to resupply. If you're in an apartment, overall security, not good, right? Any apartment situation, security is not going to be good. You don't have a defensible perimeter. You've got very thin walls. You might have a lot of people around you. They're going to come knocking on your door, say, hey, are you out of food? Because I'm out of food. You got any extra food? Stuff like that. So be ready to bug out, right? You talk about bug out bags. We've done videos on bug out bags. Focus on your essentials. Always the rule of threes: 3 minutes without air or medicine, right? 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food. You could throw in the 3 hours without shelter in there as well. They call 3Bs: bullets, beans, and bandages. You want your first aid. You need your food and water. You may need the self-defense side if that's something you're comfortable with, depending on the situation. So I want to throw that out there. Said I've had a couple people ask me for a video about prepping emergency preparedness in a small space, and I've spent enough my time of my life in them. I get it, right? Sometimes it happens. Sometimes people want to. I know people don't want to live in an apartment. They don't want to deal with the housing market. Like, I'm just going to get an apartment. I don't care. I don't care to deal with that. So it shouldn't be any shame whether you live in an apartment or where you live in. You have a place to live, right? If you're in an apartment. If you're not, that happens too, and no shame in that. So as always, thank you for watching. Appreciate all the views, the likes, the subscribes. Trying to make some content, been super busy, trying to work out more as much as I can, trying to rock, just a lot of stuff going on. But appreciate you being here, and as always, thank you for watching.